Hello everyone, welcome welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a series review for the Winnowing Flame Trilogy by Jen Williams. I'm so excited to be talking about this book. This is a series that completely took over my life for a month. I read these books back to back to back. I couldn't put it down. I was invested right away, and this is just an excellently crafted sci fantasy story. I'm going to start off with a plot summary of the first book, and then I'm going to talk about the characters and the points of view that we have going on, and then I'm going to talk about each book individually without delving into spoilers and what I like and dislike about each book in the trilogy. So this is what this trilogy is about. So we are on a world known as Sarn, and Sarn has been under attack for thousands and thousands of years by these people, these aliens known as the Worm People or the Duralia. The only people who can fight the Duralia or who are strong enough to fight the Duralia are these people called the Aborans, and the Aborans are not quite human. They're like 7 feet tall. They're kind of ethereal, sort of elf-like, but they're more vampiric, shall we say. So the Aborans are gifted with long life. They have a tree that supplies them with essentially like an ambrosia-like substance that keeps them immortal, healthy, and young for a very long time. They live for hundreds and hundreds of years. They're not quite immortal, but they live for a very long time. At the end of the last reign, or the last attack by the Duralia, the Tree Father, the one who supplies the Aborans their sap and their monsters who they used to fight the Duralia, died. And the Aborans were left sick, starving, dying, and they turned to human blood as a substitute for this sap, with some deadly consequences. So drinking human blood, while it kind of sustains them and lets them live maybe a little bit longer, it ultimately infects them with this disease called the Crimson Flux, and it's a wasting away disease. It's very painful, and there's no cure. The Crimson Flux has like decimated the Aboran population, and there's been rumblings that another reign, another attack is imminent by the Duralia. So that is the series summary. That's kind of where we're starting at in book one. And now I'm going to talk about our characters and our point of view characters. The first book is called The Ninth Reign, and we have primarily three main characters, 3 points of view characters, but I'll talk about the 2 sub-main characters who we get a point of view kind of halfway through the book and later. So our 3 primary characters are Tormalin, or Tor. He is an Abora man. We have Noon, or Fel Noon. She is a witch. And we have Vintage. Vintage is my favorite. Her real name is Vincenza de Grazon. She is kind of from a ennobled family to an extent, and she's also a vintner. And now Vintage is a scholar and archaeologist, and she's been obsessed with the Duralia relics and studying the Worm People and their artifacts. And so she and Tor, she kind of enlists Tor's help on her adventures. And Tormalin is from Ebora. He is an Aboran man, and 50 years before the start of the story, he leaves Ebora and he's like, I'm gonna go see the world while I still have some time left to live and, you know, enjoy my time on this planet before I die. And so he and, again, Vintage kind of team up and are friends. And it's kind of imminent that Tor is probably going to eventually succumb to the Crimson Flux at some point. And then we have Fel Noon, or Noon, and she, at the beginning of the book, witches in this world wield the Winnowing Flame, which is a fire magic that is very hard to control, and so the witches of this entire world are basically captured as soon as their powers are discovered and thrown in a tower-like prison, and Noon is stuck in this tower to begin the story. And of course, these three characters' storylines intertwine. We also get 2 additional points of view later in the book. One is, and they're both at Warren's. One is Hestilian. She is Tourmalin's sister, and she becomes a very important character for the rest of the series in the second half of the first book. Then we have Aldazar, who is another Eboran, and he's more quiet and soft-spoken, and he becomes a major player in the rest of the series. Additional characters that we get point of views for in like later books are Byrne, who is a human man, and Byrne and Aldazar start a little flirtation, a little male-male romance. Vincenza, Vintage, is also gay, so we love the representation there. And we also follow Aerie, who is an Eboran child, and Aerie gets a point of view in the second book moving forward. So those are our characters. I would say our primary main characters are, again, Vintage, Tor, and Noon, in my opinion. And to me, it's hard to say who, like, I'd say those 3 characters are equally primary. Now let's talk about book 1 and what I loved about it. I love that there are aliens. I love that it's kind of a blend of genres, a little bit of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy. We have eldritch, really creepy, scary monsters that are like eldritch beings. And so this has like a slight horror element to it. This is a little bit of a violent one. I wouldn't call it grimdark, but it's definitely more violent. I love this world that we have. It's kind of, if you've ever seen Nausicaa, Valley and the Valley of the Wind, it's a Ghibli film, and I love how the world is basically infested by these giant bugs, and it gives, the Ninth Ring gives similar vibes to it. There's these giant mushroom fields of like a mushroom forest, and there's infected animals and that kind of thing. Like the Duralia truly like poison this world and everything in it. Even though they're not currently fighting the Duralia, like their remains leave like this poisonous substance that kind of does climate catastrophes essentially and poisons everything and everyone. This first book has a little bit of a, oh, you're sick and injured, let me take care of you type scenes, and a little bit of a budding romance, which I absolutely loved. And this is also kind of like a journey quest type story, at least in the first book. I absolutely love the first book in this series. Again, I could not put it down. I read it in 24 hours or less. I gave it full 5 out of 5 stars. I think this is an incredibly strong first book in a series, and an incredibly strong first book on its own. Book 2 is The Bitter Twins, and now I didn't love The Bitter Twins as much as book 1, but I still quite enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. The reason I didn't love book 2 is the whole book is essentially a big side quest to me. At least that's what it feels like to me. We kind of get away from the main conflict of, you know, this imminent Duralia worm people threat, and we're kind of going off on a side quest. The side quest is important, but it still feels like a side quest. I love the gay romance in here. I love the animal companions that show up in book 2, and the animal companions like speak and are sentient and have their own thoughts and opinions and feelings, which we love. I love a good animal companion in a story. I also like how in the second book we are traveling abroad, so we get even more of this world, and we get to see other nations and other peoples besides the ones we've met in the first book. So I think this second book does a great job of expanding the world building from book 1 and making us love our characters even more. Then we have The Poison Song, which is the 3rd book in the series. Now, I recommend reading this series back to back to back. There really isn't any time skips between installments in this series, so and not that they really end in cliffhangers, but there's no pause. The action is just continuously flowing, and so I would highly recommend that this is a series that you would love to binge if you have the opportunity to do so. The thing that bothers me about this series is that in books 2 and 3, the characters are separated from each other so often, and they're just like this little found family, and I just want them to be together and going on adventures and solving problems as a group. And so that's kind of the first 50% of Poison Song. But then the second half of the book is like all of the buildup and everything that leads to the final battles and the final outcomes for this series as a whole. It has a little bit of a leveling up type plot line. Again, I'm trying not to spoil anything. There's a new queer relationship that's budding in this third book, which I actually really enjoyed. I ended up giving The Poison Song 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really think this is a solid ending, but I will say I was I was a little disappointed in the ending, not because of what happens, because the final moment happens and there's absolutely no falling action in this story to be had. The only falling action we get is an epilogue, which is a letter Vintage is writing to her nephew, and she's like recapping how everyone's doing like a couple months later. And that just kind of, to me, I liked where everyone ended up, and I liked the outcome of this trilogy overall. I just think that there was no breathing room at the end of the story to let the consequences of that final action sink in for us to like feel the depth of emotion I think Jen Williams was trying to evoke with that ending. I was still very emotionally invested in this story, but that ending was just so quick and so abrupt. I really wish there was just like 4 more chapters of wrapping things up and kind of letting us sit in our feelings just a little bit longer. Ultimately, I loved this series. I would give this series as a whole, I mean, on average, it would be like a 4.5 out of 5 stars, like a really excellent, solid trilogy. I think if you're a big fan of fantasies, adventures, character-driven work, I think dragons, animal companions, side quests, sci-fantasy, I think you should definitely check out the Winnowing Flame trilogy. Thank you so much for watching. That's it for this review. Let me know if you've read this series. I would love to know in the comments down below. I will see you in another video of mine very soon.